Let's go ahead and move into conservation and ethics. This doesn't come free. There's a lot that goes into the sport of fishing. We first have to ask, why do we have DNR and game wardens and fisheries and all the other stuff that's kind of wrapped up into this? Well, there's four good answers. One is to protect the natural environment and to create recreation opportunities. A real big general, protect the public health. And one that I am particularly concerned with is provide for prosperity. This stuff doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen naturally. This is something that we manage. And if we manage it well, it becomes a real gem and a real diamond. Let's take a look at history of wildlife in Indiana. Indiana became a state in 1816. We had a population of around 140,000. That's Bloomington on a football weekend when we're playing Ohio State. Not that many people. We had about 19 million acres of forested land. They said that a squirrel could leave a tree in Boston and hop from tree to tree until the Mississippi River. Well, that in certain places they could do that. In southern Indiana, they certainly could. Northern Indiana was primarily prairie with buffalo up until about 1830. When the last buffalo left the state of Indiana. Lynx, the cat, was last seen in 1832. Black bear was driven out by the mid 1800s. Elk disappeared about the same time. Mountain lion disappeared the same time. This is about 10 years before the Civil War. Mountain lion and wolverine were last seen in Indiana. Okay, here's something that's really bizarre. I know that a lot of you will not believe this. White-tailed deer was last seen in Indiana in 1893. They actually know the name of the farmer who shot that deer. It was the last recorded deer in the state. Timber wolves were gone by the early 1900s. By 1915, we had gone from 19 million acres of forested land down to 1.5 million acres. Before you totally freak out about that, remember, everything that we did back in those days required wood. Transportation required wood. Your buggies, your wagons were made out of wood. We didn't have steel to make steel wagons. They were made from wood. You like butter on your bread? That butter was made in a butter churn. That was made of wood. You liked bread. That bread was mixed in a bread bowl. That was made of wood. That was rolled out on a breadboard. That was made of wood. When you got tired, you sat down in a chair. That was made of wood. You ate at a table. That was made of wood. In a house that was made of wood. You cooked over a fire that was made of wood. So you kind of get the picture here. We used wood for everything. And so it's no surprise that, in 100 years, we had used up most of our wood supply. And it's not just Indiana, this is the entire U.S. So at the start of the First World War, there were not that many trees in the United States, particularly in Indiana. Porcupine disappeared. First World War. Prairie chicken was last seen in 1972. I have no idea what a prairie chicken is. Not all is lost. This is where the public and government intervention comes in, primarily in the form of Department of Natural Resources, that today, with a population of around 6.6 million people, we have white-tailed deer everywhere. They were originally introduced in 1934. This was during the Great Depression, and we imported 296 deer, I believe, from Wisconsin. And you can see the results right now. You probably saw a deer on campus this week. I mean, they're just literally everywhere. Turkeys were reintroduced in the 1950s. River otter introduced in the 1990s. I know a couple people who were involved in that project. Incredibly successful project. Right now, the DNR is trying to figure out how to introduce a river otter trapping season, because they have too many freaking otters. These guys have reproduced very, very well, and they are starting to do some damage. Any property owner who out in the country who has a small lake that they have spent several $100s stocking with fish, the last thing they want to see is a river otter, because you never see one river otter. You'll see an entire colony of otters. And otters are very opportunistic eaters, and they will literally stay in one particular place until the food is gone. So if you have a nice 2-acre pond, with hundreds of fish in it, they will sit there and they will stay and eat until there are literally no more fish in those waters. Then they'll leave. So this has become a real problem for some property owners. Black bear, we have a male down near Camp Atterbury that has been seen since 2015. There's rumors that he found a mate. Don't know. We may see we may see a lot more black bears. There's been rumors of a mountain lion for decades around Bloomington. There was a pretty credible report last year of a mountain lion dining on a house cat over in Brown County. And they have everything except a really clear picture of it. We have coyotes in the city of Bloomington. We have a lot of wildlife. Our forest land has increased to about 4.5 million. And whenever you consider that we're trying to support and house 6.5 million humans, 4.5 million acres of forested land's not doing all that badly. We would have to start tearing down a lot of apartment complexes and suburbs to really increase that to any great extent now. So this is where a lot of your taxpayer dollars are going. We're going to talk more about that in Unit 2. But all of this brings us to the point where we need to talk about fish and wildlife regulations. Most of you probably know that if you're going to fish in Indiana, you need a state fishing license. And you can get that online. It used to be you went into a sporting goods store or a hardware store and bought your fishing license. Those days disappeared back in the 90s. Nowadays, you do this online. And this is a website for the DNR fishing guide. And I am not going to go into this in real great depth. I'm going to kind of leave this up to you folks. I encourage you to click on the link and explore the website. It's actually a pretty decent website. They've done a lot of work on this over the years. When in the infancy of the internet, it pretty much sucked. But they've gotten much, much better with their web development. So anyway, I encourage you to get a copy of the regulations. You can also find these at some of the larger sporting goods stores like Dick's or Cabela's or something like that. They're made free to the public. You just have to find a copy. I usually end up just downloading the PDF of it. So let's talk about what you'll find inside the regulations. Number one, who needs a fishing license? Basically, anyone over the age of 18 needs a fishing license. Whenever you start to become a really old person, oh my gosh, 67? Well, okay, I only have a few years left. You have to buy a fishing license. And fishing licenses are pretty inexpensive. I mean, we're talking less than a pizza. I think the basic license is $17. I always buy what's called the combo license, which is the fishing and hunting license for $25. I've just done that kind of as just an annual renewal type thing. In Unit 2, we're going to talk a lot more about this. But there are a few exceptions with who needs a license, but for most able-bodied people, you need a license. You need to carry the license with you while you are fishing and present it to the conservation officer or any other law enforcement officer that asks to see it. Some states require you to wear your license on the visible, on the outside. In Pennsylvania, you have a little pouch that you clip to the back of your fly fishing vest. Some people will clip it in a little pouch to their hat. Check each individual state because it varies. One caveat when we're talking about fish and game regulations: exceptions. There's always exceptions to a rule. And this is why if you are going to fish and you are going to buy a license, I really encourage you to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes reading through the regulations. There's exceptions to everything. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. But remember that you have to carry the license with you. I have my license in a little pouch that I keep in my Creo bag, and I don't fish without the Creo bag, so I always have the license with me. Some species will have specific seasons that you can fish for them. In Indiana, the only species that's regulated by season are trout. And again, look in the regulations to see specifically when those dates are published. Typically, it'll be April. April 15th is, I think, what it is right now. Creel limits. Some species are regulated as to how many you can keep. Not catch, but keep. In the regulations, you'll see a term called black bass. And black bass simply kind of aggregate largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, spotted bass, Kentucky bass, rock bass, so on and so forth, into a black bass group. Minimum size is 14 inches if you're fishing in lakes and 13 inches if you're fishing in rivers. You can keep 5 of these per day. You can catch 6. You have to throw one back. And pay attention to this, because if a conservation officer peers into the back of your pickup truck and you've got a bucket, 5-gallon bucket there, and there are 9 tail fins sticking out, and you're the only one fishing, there's going to be a problem. Bluegill, there are no general creel limits. You can catch as many as you want. Red ear, there's 25. Striped bass, 2, no size limit. This is where the exceptions come in. Check the regulations. Also, check the particular body of water that you're fishing. Very often you will see signs posted that in this lake you cannot keep any catfish. In this lake you can only keep largemouth bass between 12 and 15 inches. That's called a slot limit. It gets pretty nuanced, and so you really kind of have to pay attention here. I don't want to impart any fear in anyone about fishing and getting caught by the conservation officer, for a violation. Generally, these guys and gals are very cool. One of their primary jobs is education. And if you have some minor infraction, you're not going to be put in jail. They'll probably just, explain the regulations to you and ask you not to do that again. In the very worst case, they might give you a citation. Sometimes it could have a small fee attached to it, but it's absolutely nothing to freak out about. We'll talk more about conservation officers in Unit 2. Here's some of those exceptions that I was talking about. They're just all over the place. They change year to year. These are examples of what some of these things can be. I've lost track of them, to be honest with you, and I don't update this every single year. That's why you need to read the regulations, because for every rule there's an exception. So you just have to kind of stay on top of this. Property rights and access is a growing concern in Indiana. We are getting more and more people. We are getting less places to fish and hunt. Times have changed. Access is diminishing. And, as voting adults, this is something I hope that you pay a lot of attention to. The DNR, I think, does the very best they can with the money that they have. If you are fishing on public lands, Lake Monroe, Dean Wilderness area, most rivers, you do not need permission. If you are fishing on private property, you absolutely need permission to do so. If you're driving out through the country and there's this nice little lake over there and there's a parking lot, you just can't stop and go in there and go fishing. That's very likely someone's private property, and so you need to ask permission. In some states, you have to have written permission that you can be on that property and fishing and hunting. So read the regulations, and if you're changing states, by all means read the regulations. There are a lot of public access points. The easiest way to find these things is honestly to go onto the DNR website, and they have a section called Where to Fish. And it's a very good interactive program that they've set up there, and you can find literally hundreds of places to fish. One big question that comes up is who owns Indiana streams? technically, the public citizens of Indiana own the water in streams and rivers. They do not own the ground under the water. So if you're fishing Sugar Creek up near Crawfordsville, beautiful, beautiful stream, you can be in a canoe and float down the stream, and you're on public property. If you pull over to the shore, beach your boat, and start walking around, you're on private property. Most of the time, this isn't an issue. There are some cases where that becomes a huge issue. If you're a fly fisherman and you're wading a stream, generally it's not an issue. If you're out in the country, mostly farmland, and you're wading a stream, you're trespassing because you're physically on the bottom. If you're in a boat and the boat's floating on the water, you're on public property. So you get the distinction, and the rule of thumb is courtesy. It's not going to hurt to ask permission, and unless it's something wildly popular like Sugar Creek, you really should ask permission. I have stories I'm not going to bore you with right now. Most places in Indiana are private, and it's a really good idea to ask permission to be there. Shoreline etiquette. Number one, have a license. Make sure you have permission to be where you are. If you're going down to Lake Monroe or out to Yellowwood, those are public lands, so you don't need permission. Park in designated areas. Please, please, please do that. And don't be a butthead about this. Don't block people in or be stupid. Just be a nice person. I mean, be nice to people. Most fishermen I've come across are just super nice people. Every now and then you'll get somebody who's having a really bad day. Just steer clear. If there's a whole bunch of people fishing in one particular spot, I don't fish there. I'll go someplace else. Obey all the fish and wildlife regulations that you've learned about by studying the regulations, and generally just be a good sportsman. One last thing, with streams, you have to learn to communicate. If you're fishing a stream, you're wading, and you come around a bend and you see somebody there, don't mess that area up for them. Be patient. Either get out of the water and walk around them quietly, not right there on the shoreline, but get back away from the stream, and just talk to them. Sometimes they'll say, "Sure, go ahead and fish through." The biggest thing is communication when you're out on a stream. And the final thing that I like to talk about is leave no trace. Don't be a slob, please. If you brought it in, take it out. I have a personal pet peeve with styrofoam bait containers and spent fishing line. I don't know. It's just kind of like, trigger warning. These are two things that would just really kind of set me off. I encourage you to carry a trash bag with you. It doesn't have to be very big, like a grocery, plastic bag. Doesn't take up very much space. You can throw them in your creel or your tackle box or your pocket, and you see some trash, just pick it up and take it out and dispose of it properly. Leave No Trace is a program that was developed back during the 70s. when we were starting to see some real impact, negative impact on outdoor use. And it's just a kind of a philosophy of how to enjoy the natural resources without damaging it. If you want more information, there's a website right here that you can visit. Indiana University Outfitters oftentimes will invite Leave No Trace people to come in and conduct seminars, and you can actually get certified in Leave No Trace. It's really a very good organization, and they have principles for different environments, everything from lakes and streams to high alpine meadows to mountaineering, how to climb mountains without trashing them up. So if you're interested, please check that out. Otherwise, we're going to close this this lesson, and we will jump into fishing tackle in the next lesson. Hope everyone has a wonderful week and stay safe.